And greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, and loving life. Coming at you again tonight. Want to talk about the postal obligation, capital, and audit expense. And before we get into it, I want to remind everybody, please hit that like, share, and subscribe. There's a PayPal button down below for anybody who wants to join the panel, or for everybody who wants to share some love. And the StreamYard link is there for anybody who wants to join the panel. We've got Anthony and Jesse with us. How you doing tonight, guys?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Good, good. Glad you could join us again tonight. We did not get together today like we had wanted to, but I'm sure you'll be able to catch on to what we're doing here tonight as I go through this. We're going to extend on from what we did last night, is all. With the first one being financial institutions. So glad you could join us. And we got Anthony. How you doing tonight, Anthony? Been a long time since I heard from you.
Yeah, man. I'm doing well, quite well. I'm blessed with every day that I live. That's how I see it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
tonight, like I said, we're going to go over the postal obligation, capital, and audit expense, and that's what I've been talking about for quite a while. Is the audit? It's a matter of knowing that the record is in error, and that's all that we need to do is correct the record. So we're not attacking anybody as far as status or title or office or anything. All we want to do is go back and correct the records. And the problem with the record is that they're in the wrong hands. They're being held by an administrative system, and it should be held by the judicial system, in my belief, according to the research. And so let's get into it as we talk about financial institution as it relates to the stuff we mentioned yesterday in 31 CFR, the Treasury direct account, and the different terms and stuff. And you notice it's all about financial institutions. And so 18 U.S. Code 20 tells us the definition of financial institution according to the U.S. Code. And it says, as used in this title, the term financial institution means, and it's got all of these down here. There's 10 of them total. So there are 10 different points where one could be considered a financial institution, and an insured depository institution as defined in Section 3C2 of the Federal Deposit Insurance Act. Now, Treasury Direct is a depository institution. A credit union with accounts insured by the National Credit Union Share Insurance Fund. And those credit union accounts are also a depository institution. A federal home loan bank or a member, as defined in Section 2 of the Federal Home Loan Bank Act, of the Federal Home Loan Bank System. Number 4 is an important one, guys, because it's talking about a system institution of the Farm Credit System. Now, the Farm Credit Act of 1971 is what established the Farm Credit System, and that is the agricultural kit system. This is Title VII. And in Title VII, it says the definition of animal includes but is not limited to man. This is the sweat equity labor as you work in any industry as it goes to gross domestic product. And that's coming from the agriculture, all your minerals, metals, woods, all kinds of products, your foods, everything. It's all agricultural. The Farm Credit System is the financial institution of the United States. Even the banks depend on the Farm Credit System. HUD depends on the Farm Credit System. Every governmental operation depends on the Farm Credit System. Everything else is a system institution of the Farm Credit System. 5. A small business investment company, as defined in Section 103 of the Small Business Investment Act of 1958, which is 15 U.S.C. 1662, which I believe we have it up here to look at. And in that, the small business investment company, you're going to see a conversion is a small business concern. That small business concern is an individual, one born in a state and deemed a resident for income tax purposes as a small business concern because they're born in the United States and granted a United States nationality citizenship, which is a United States business. So the resident becomes a small business concern upon enumeration at birth. 6. A depository institution holding company, and this would be like PayPal, MasterCard even. Your credit card companies are holding company institutions of a depository institution. A Federal Reserve Bank or a member bank of the Federal Reserve System. An organization operating under Section 25 or Section 25A of the Federal Reserve Act. A branch or agency of a foreign bank. As such terms are defined in paragraphs 1 and 3 of Section 1B of the International Banking Act of 1978. Just so you guys know, and we'll go over this eventually, but you are the lender. You are the foreign bank lending to the Federal Reserve banks through a credit system. 10. A mortgage lending business as defined in Section 27 of this title, or any person or entity that makes in whole or in part a federally related mortgage loan as defined in Section 3 of the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. So it gives you the acts that they're operating under. Okay? The Federal Deposit Insurance Act, the Federal Home Loan Bank Act, the Farm Credit Act, the Small Business Investment Act, the Federal Deposit Insurance Act, the Federal Reserve Act, the International Banking Act, and the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. Which one do you want to work with? So you don't have any ownership in land except to the rights, titles, and interest to its possession and use. So the documentation as far as loans and mortgages has nothing to do with ownership. It has to do with a financial institution and its conduct of affairs. Any questions on that, guys? You can see how pretty much everything you do in life is going to be considered some kind of activity with a financial institution, and that activity is a foreign bank dealing with a domestic bank. And you are the foreign bank. Their domestic bank for the United States is the Federal Reserve System of the Federal Reserve banks. Those are domestic to the United States. United States itself is a foreign entity that leases property from the American people. We are domestic. We are the bank.
And it executes the American people's will as well.
Correct. As long as people know how to do that, you have a republic if you can keep it. So the next one is 15 U.S. Code 681. definition of organization. Incorporation and charter under state law, period of succession, area of operations. A small business investment company shall be an incorporated body, a limited liability, or a limited partnership, organized and chartered or otherwise existing under state law solely for the purpose of performing the functions and conducting the activities contemplated under this subchapter, which, if incorporated, has succession for a period of not less than 30 years, unless sooner dissolved by its shareholders. United States, the States of the Union, and that resident. Activities contemplated under this chapter has succession for a period of not less than 30 years. See, they are running the business, and you are a small business concern as a resident, and that creates a limited partnership. And if a limited partnership has succession for a period of not less than 10 years and possesses the powers reasonably necessary to perform such functions and conduct such activities, and possesses the powers reasonably necessary to perform such functions and conduct such activities. And we've recently gone over the Commodities Exchange Act as it relates to, I believe it was the, what was it? Oh, shoot, I can't remember what, but we went over the Commodities Exchange Act where they talked about the eligible contract participant or a person reasonably believed to be an eligible contract participant. So they have a reasonableness to believe that you are necessary and able to perform and conduct such activities because you opened a bank account saying that you know what banking is about and you know how to open a checkbook and write a check. See, that's based on basic knowledge without knowing exactly how the banking itself works. And I don't suggest that to anybody. I suggest people learn how this banking works before you go opening bank accounts. Otherwise, you're just handing your assets over to the banks, and they don't give a flying shit and rat's ass about you. The area in which the company is to conduct its operations and the establishment of branch offices or agencies, if authorized by the articles, shall be subject to the approval of the administration. Administration, the term administration means a small business administration. And that's what you're doing is you're conducting the affairs of a business. And you're considered a small business concern for income tax purposes under the administrative powers of the state. That's what that birth certificate is doing. It's in the wrong hand.
Until you reclaim the equity and return or get the estate redeemed into life, correct?
Correct.
Perfect.
Correct. You capture it from the state and you surrender it to the Health and Human. I've got it set up 3 birth certificates. One goes to Health and Human Services with a directive for them to gather up all the minor securities in the accountings. And that would be all the securities you've signed throughout your lifetime in the state or in other states. Their instruction is to gather them all up. And when they've got them all gathered up, they send them forward to the United States with the second birth certificate and its directive for the United States to do the clearing and settling through the Treasury and establish that Treasury direct account. The third one is the one to the post office, and that comes with its directive that the post office is the one that's going to oversee all the auditing so that when it's all said and done, that bond sitting in the Treasury is securitized with the equity of the post office.
So are you saying you're going to surrender a birth certificate back to the postmaster? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. One to the Health and Human Services. And I'm going to surrender all three of the Health and Human Services under directive for them because they're the ones responsible for estate recovery. Then they have two more left, one to the United States because it's the United States estate, and then one to the Postal Service because they're the ones that hold the equity.
All right.
And you appoint the Human Services as trustee for all three of those transactions, or do you? Yes.
Well,
Yep.
whoever you surrender
Each
it to automatically becomes your fiduciary. So you don't have to appoint them trustee. If they deposit that security, they automatically by default become your fiduciary.
right, but what you're doing is you're not depositing the security for investment. So you have to give them a directive. In that directive, you assign whoever at the Health and Human Services to do their part. It's going to include a directive with them that there's two more birth certificates with a directive to the United States Treasury and then another one to the United States Postal Service. And each one of those is going to have a directive to who you need to assign for the trustee on those duties.
Yeah, a special directive rather than a general directive, which is when someone dies and then they loot the whole thing.
Correct. Yep, a special direct deposit. So the next one is articles of incorporation and approval, and this is where we've got to understand this is in line with that 12 USC 614. If you don't have any articles of a small business investment company, then that presumption doesn't fit, and this is one of the evidences they need. There are no articles of incorporation, so your small business concern by resident determination no longer fits. You cannot consider me as part of your incorporation or charter under state law simply because I was in a purity of secession from my mom. That rebuttal or that presumption is hereby rebutted, not an organization. So the next one is 15 U.S. Code 6827. Again, another set of definitions. Now this one's going to have several definitions we're going to look at. And stop me anytime, guys. Stop me anytime you have any questions or anything. And I hope you got your pen and notepads out. Because this one here says customer. This is the guy that customizes all of those official documents. You have to understand how to customize them. Otherwise, you're just blatantly, blindly signing these documents and being taken advantage of. And it shows that you don't care what they're defining you as. And that's the problem. You cuck up to the convenience and comfort of somebody else doing that for you. The term customer means, with respect to a financial institution, any person or authorized representative of a person to whom the financial institution provides a product or service, including the acting as a fiduciary. So as a Social Security customer, that financial institution provided you with a product known as a Social Security card that allowed you to use that product to acquire other state health and human services. The Health and Human Services is that such fiduciary upon enumeration at birth. They're the ones that create that state's vital statistics jurisdiction.
Yeah,
And you get to customize.
That's where it
Go ahead.
landed. It's called the landed
Yep.
estate, and that's where it landed.
Yep. And you get to customize all of those official documents from that point on if you want to, but nobody ever teaches you. That's the problem. Education, knowledge is the benefit. Customer information of a financial institution means any information maintained by or for a financial institution which is derived from the relationship between the financial institution and a customer of the financial institution and is identified with the customer. So the customer, again, a service provided through that Social Security Administration is an administrative service through the Department of Transportation and Department of Motor Vehicles to administrate a license under the state, and it identifies a customer. Now, my last driver's license that I had identified the customer by last name first, and then the first and second name, and it was in all uppercase. Okay?
Registered agent for process of service.
Yep. And that's a presumption because you're not qualified. You're not
Nope.
qualified to perform the functions of public office, which is what that state ID says. You're on state business.
Ain't no oath of office on file.
Nope. Here it says document. And this is important to understand the 2006 Electronic Record Act. It says the term document means any information in any form. So once you get that keypad, it is documented. That is an electronic document. Financial institution. In general, the term financial institution means any institution engaged in the business of providing financial services to customers who maintain a credit, deposit, trust, or other financial account or relationship with the institution. That Social Security account is a trust account. They are a financial institution. You can get the Social Security statement.
Proclamation 2039, special trust accounts will be established.
Yep. And then it goes on to say certain financial institutions specifically included. Securities institution, this is the one that gives you the two parts of the code where they talk about broker-dealer, investment advisor. These two sections, I urge people to read them up. Section 78C, and that's Title 15, U.S. Code 78C, and Section 80B-2. Investment advisor, investment company, 80A-3. Certain persons and entities specifically excluded. Further definition by regulation. The Federal Trade Commission, after consultation with the federal banking agencies and the Securities and Exchange Commission, may prescribe regulations clarifying or describing the types of institutions which shall be treated as financial institutions for the purposes of this subchapter. So we have institutions at the state level of residency, which shall be treated as financial institutions, and they issue you a Social Security card as an authorized representative, so you can lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. Make sense, guys? Any questions on that? Okay. So the next one I got is that 15 U.S. Code 662 definitions. Term administration means small business administration that we saw earlier. Term administrator means the administrator of the small business administration. Term small business investment company, and licensee, driver's license. State ID as a license, folks. It names you as a licensee. Mean a company approved by the administration to operate under the provisions of this chapter and issued a license as provided in Section 681 of this title. So don't tell me that driver's license has nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with business because it's a license. That's what you are authorized to do, is business. But it's on state business, not your own private business. Your trade or business, which is defined in the tax code. The performance of the functions of public office. No matter how you look at it, it's a business concern of the state, and you are working with them.
So that's why you get the driver license, because you're operating in commerce and whatever you so do in quote unquote employment as a state employee.
Yep. And here's the term small business concern. Shall have the same meaning as in the Small Business Act, 15 U.S.C. 631, except that, for the purpose of this chapter, an investment by a venture capital firm, investment company, including a small business investment company, employee welfare benefit plan, or pension plan. Now remember when we talked about the matrix, use of the matrix for the health care insurance and the federal life insurance. That's what we're talking about here is the employee welfare benefit plan as a health and human services, health care services, health insurance. And then the pension plan is a life insurance plan at the federal level. Or trust, foundation, or endowment that is exempt from federal income taxation. Shall not cause a business concern to be deemed not independently owned and operated regardless of the allocation of control. Regardless of the allegation of control. See, that's what they have is that legal title, which is control and entry. That's all they have. They don't have possession and use. During the investment period, under any investment agreement between the business concern and the entity making the investment. So when you go to these administrative courts, you're the business concern and they are the entity making the investment. And they get to take your data elements on one side of that counter and say they're this, and then on the other side of the counter, they convert them. And this is what I'm telling you, folks. I have evidence of this, and this is how I learn my shit. When I get a financial index from the court, and I know I never gave them but a first and last name and an address and all that, and they take that information and they give me information by saying they listed it as a firm name. That tells me they're using something wrong, because I never authorized them to use my last name in any other fashion than what I was taught.
That's why they call it the booking process in the jail. The double. Yep. They might as well call it the double book entry ledger.
Yep, and they don't want to show you the other side of that ledger.
No, they don't.
You got to cause them to do that.
They want that credit on account for themselves.
Yep. Absolutely. They'll get it abandoned, and then they'll claim it, and then there's the game.
And I don't... I don't think there's anything else on this one I wanted to talk about. Third-party debt means any indebtedness for borrowed money other than indebtedness owed to the administration. How can you owe to the administration? So the third-party debt means any indebtedness for borrowed money. And guess who owes for that borrowed money? Again, like I said, you are the lender. You are the lender in all cases. Paperwork will show this.
Oh, even in the court cases.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's on mine, I got the financial index, and I saw that they converted the last name to a firm name and the social security number to an obligor number. I never heard of an obligor number. I've heard of an obligor, and I know the obligor is the one that's obligated on the obligation. So if the obligor is identified by a number, it sure as fuck ain't me, is it?
Are you Keith Orland Little? Are you appearing in court today? Fucking the old bait and switch, huh?
Absolutely. So the next one I've got, we're going to get into those postal codes now because this is where it's at. Under 39 CFR 76.12, or 762.12. And this is what we're looking at. A disbursement postal money order means a money order described in Part 762 issued by the Postal Service to pay one of its own obligations. And if the Postal Service is the one that's obligated for the equity and you want equity, don't you have to come with a disbursement postal money order?
That's what it says.
For $1 full acquittance and discharge.
So the next one is a financial organization. Remember, we started out financial institution, and then I told you about the organization, and now it's financial organization. Means any bank, savings and loan association, or similar institution. So an institution is a financial institution, and it's a similar institution if it's a financial organization. It's just a big runaround saying the exact same thing. Any bank, savings and loan association, federal or state chartered credit union. Those are all the things we already read in the other one. They're just calling them financial organizations here. Okay? Now watch what happens here. D. Person or persons means an individual or individuals, or an organization or organizations, whether incorporated or not, including all forms of banking institutions. So as an institution, it's a financial institution, and a financial institution includes all forms of banking institutions, just like all forms of banking institutions would include all forms of financial institutions. They all have their own little cash registers, right? You all got your own little wallets and purses, right? It's a banking institution. It's the institution of banking. Okay? It's that simple. Now the next one is 39 U.S. Code 2005 obligations. Now this is going to tell us all the obligations of the United States Postal Service. That's why we're in 39 U.S. Code. Postal Service. It says the Postal Service is authorized to borrow money and to issue and sell such obligations as it determines necessary to carry out the purposes of this title, other than any of the purposes for which the corresponding authority is available to the Postal Service under Section 2011. The aggregate amount of obligations issued by the Postal Service, which may be outstanding at any one time, shall not exceed the maximum amount then allowable under paragraph 2 of this section, of this subsection. In any one fiscal year, the net increase in the amount of obligations outstanding issued for the purpose of capital improvements and the net increase in the amount of obligations outstanding issued for the purpose of defraying operating expenses of the Postal Service shall not exceed a combined total of $3 billion. Maximum allowable amount allowable under this paragraph is $10 billion for fiscal year 1990, 12.5 1991, and that's where it ends. So I'm wondering where it's at today. For purposes of applying the respective limitations under this subsection, the aggregate amount of obligations issued by the Postal Service which are outstanding as of any one time, and the net increase in the amount of obligations outstanding issued by the Postal Service for the purpose of capital improvements, and for purpose of defraying operating expenses of the Postal Service in any fiscal year, shall be determined by aggregating the relevant obligations issued by the Postal Service under this section with the relevant obligations issued by the Postal Service under Section 2011. So they're coinciding obligations with Section 2011. Postal Service may pledge the assets of the Postal Service and pledge and use its revenues and receipts for the payment of the principal of or interest on obligations issued by the Postal Service under this section, for the purpose of redemption thereof and for other purposes incidental thereto, including creation of reserve, sinking, and other funds which may be similarly pledged and used to such extent and in such manner as it deems necessary or desirable. As it deems necessary or desirable. Who does that tell you has the authority of pledging assets, including creation of reserve? You know what the Federal Reserve System is, don't you? It's a reserve currency, not a national currency. Remember what it said earlier between the Federal Reserve System and the Postal Service? Yeah. Postal Service is authorized to enter into binding covenants with the holders of such obligations and with the trustee, if any, under any agreement entered into in connection with the issuance thereof with respect to the establishment of reserve, sinking, and other funds, application and use of revenues, and receipts of the Postal Service, stipulations concerning the subsequent issuance of obligations, or the execution of leases or lease purchases relating to properties of the Postal Service. You listening, Jesse? And such other matters as the Postal Service deems necessary or desirable to enhance the marketability of such obligations. Notwithstanding any other provision of this section, the authority to pledge assets of the Postal Service under this subsection shall be available only to the extent that such assets are not related to the provision of competitive products, because they are not competitive products, they are marketable products. Two different classes of products, folks. For purposes of any period before accounting practices and principles under Section 201H, 2011H, have been established and applied the best information available from the Postal Service, including the audited statements required by Section 2008. So, Postal Service is the one that does the audits as it relates to marketability and competitive products. And the marketability enhancement of such obligations is that address. That's the lease. You catch that, Jesse? So, obligations issued by the Postal Service under this section shall be negotiable or non-negotiable and bearer or registered instruments. That bond, that birth certificate, is an obligation of the United States Postal Service, folks.
And that's the covenant that you established that you were just previously mentioning.
Yep. Equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. Give them their obligation. Take it from the state, hand it over to them. They do the audit. The United States corrects the records. The state minds their own business. So the next one, 39 U.S. Code 2002. Capital of the Postal Service. Anybody guess what the capital of the Postal Service is?
New York or D.C.?
No, capital.
Oh, that's their money. Financial
Right.
capital.
Check it out. The initial capital of Postal Service shall consist of the equity as reflected in the budget of the President of the government of the United States in the former Post Office Department. 5 CFR 575.102. Another set of definitions as it goes to administrative personnel. Federal government means all entities of the government of the United States, including the United States Postal Service and the Postal Regulatory Commission.
So what's the difference between the United States Postal Service and the Post Office?
The Post Office is the office at the federal government level where the Office of Inspector General is, That's the holding of office. The Postal Service is where you have all the different needful places and buildings to distribute that mailings. And that's your Postal Service. The Post Office is the regulatory end. They are the principal. It would be like the mayor and the chief of police. The mayor is the principal. The chief of police is his agent. Here?
Yeah.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah, totally.
So, the value of assets and the amount of liabilities transferred to the Postal Service upon the commencement of operation of the Postal Service shall be determined by the Postal Service subject to the approval of the Comptroller General in accordance with the following guidelines. Assets shall be valued on basis of original cost less depreciation to the extent that such value can be determined. The value recorded on the former Post Office Department's books of account shall be prima facie evidence of asset value. And this is what we're talking about here in regards to all of those Social Security records and minor accounts. They already have prima facie evidence of asset value. All the charges, all the fines, fees, costs, taxes, penalties, child support, school registration fees, driver's license registration, all of it. Every last penny is accounted for through those minor securities, and that would be available on the Social Security statement and the IRS tax transcripts. All liabilities attributable to operations of the former Post Office Department shall remain liabilities of the government of the United States, except that upon commencement of operation of the Postal Service, the unexpended balances of appropriations made to, held, or used by, or available to the former Post Office Department, and all liabilities chargeable thereto, shall become assets and liabilities, respectively, of the Postal Service. And that's what I'm saying, that last definition that we read, that federal government, that's telling us the Postal Regulatory Commission is the principal. That's the Post Office. And the United States Postal Service is the registered agent. The registered agent is already named. The capital of Postal Service at any time shall consist of its assets, including the balance in the fund and the balance in the competitive products fund. So their assets are marketable assets, and that's one fund. And then they have a competitive products fund. The Postal Service and the Administrator of General Services, where properties under the jurisdiction of the Administrator are involved. That's the address. And by you using that address, it's a Postal Service competitive product. With the approval of the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. This is why you shouldn't accept any forms from anybody unless it's got an OMB number. Shall determine which federal property shall be transferred to the Postal Service and which shall remain under the jurisdiction of any other department, agency, or establishment of the government of the United States upon the commencement of the operation of the Postal Service. And that's what they do, is they use the taxing agent as that other agency, and everything is deemed taxable property. And everybody goes around saying, okay, yeah, I'm paying. Did you know, interesting fact, guys, that 95% of income tax is paid voluntarily? That doesn't mean that you have to go out and enforce the taxes on the other 5%. It means the other 5% know that they are qualified to pay taxes. The other 95% don't know that they're not qualified to pay taxes, but they pay them anyway, voluntarily. It's sickening. So anyway, the transfer shall be accomplished at the time of or as near as possible to the commencement of the operation of the Postal Service, and the valuation of the asset and capital of the Postal Service shall be adjusted accordingly. This is what we're doing with those certificates. We're going to adjust the assets and the values accordingly by doing an audit of the accounts. That's all we're doing. All contracts, records, and documents relating to the operation of departmental service and the postal field service of the former post office department. That's the public record. Everything posted to all accounts. That's the postal record. All things posted to all accounts. Your Facebook account is a postal record. It's a public record. Okay, the last one we got for tonight. (39) U.S. Code 2008, Audit and Expenditures. The accounts and operations of the Postal Service shall be audited by the Comptroller General, and the reports thereon made to the Congress, to the extent and at such times as he may determine. The Postal Service shall maintain an adequate internal audit of the financial transactions of the Postal Service. If federal government means all entities of the government of the United States, and it includes the United States Postal Service and the Postal Regulatory Commission, then maintaining an adequate internal audit of the financial transactions of the Postal Service is dependent upon their financial accountant, known as the Federal Reserve System, and the Treasury. Those are the accountants. But that's according to the general ledger. See, that United States citizen is tied to that general ledger, folks. It's supposed to be anyway, but it's not. And that's the problem. Again, it's at the state level, and they're not administrating it properly and not tying it to the general ledger until the death certificate hits, and then they're going to do a balance, like Anthony said earlier. They're going to come in and take whatever they need, and if there's anything left, they'll take that too, as long as there ain't no squabbling beneficiaries over there screaming. It's their financial system. They created it for themselves. You better learn how it's used. So the next one says, subject only to the provisions of this chapter. The Postal Service is authorized to make such expenditures and to enter into such contracts, agreements, and arrangements upon such terms and conditions and in such manner as it deems necessary, including the final settlement of all claims and litigation by or against the Postal Service. Judicial Officer Department is an independent and neutral forum within the United States Postal Service. So again, that internal audit is being done in those administrative courts already. That's what they're doing. And it is tied to that general ledger that they are required to balance. And they are the ones that do all the final settlement of all claims and litigations by or against the Postal Service. And the administrative law judges obviously are working internally as an independent and neutral forum within the Judicial Officer Department known as the United States Postal Service. Nothing in this section shall be construed as denying to the Postal Service the power to obtain audits of the accounts of the Postal Service and reports concerning its financial condition and operations by certified public accounting firms. Such audits and reports shall be in addition to those required by this section. At least once each year, beginning with the fiscal year commencing after June 1st or June 30th, 1971, the Postal Service shall obtain a certification from an independent certified public accounting firm of the accuracy of any financial statements of the Postal Service used in determining and establishing postal rates. Nothing else. And with that, we come to the end of the stream for tonight, at least the information. What do you guys got on it so far? What's on your minds that bring about any questions?
I'm thinking those $1 postal money orders are pretty important for any discharge of any obligations that come to the estate's way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They have to, we have to get them to, I guess I shouldn't say we, I gotta pose it in a manner that people can comprehend it, yet evidently people don't. It's a conversion system, and there's a postal form 6387 out there that has it right on the form, but they don't know how to read it. And these are Postal Service workers who are supposed to be excellent at communication, meaning they should know concise English and the terms and conditions stated on their own forms. But it doesn't seem like they understand that, so I've got to work on that some more. But you know, that's the same thing with the homemade stamp. I got it working out there in New Hampshire because the guy that I was dealing with was a small podunk postmaster, you know, small podunk town in the mountains, postmaster. Well, it seems reasonable. Let me look into it. Checked into it, and for him it was no problem. But in the big metropolitans and stuff, in the bigger cities and stuff, they're gung ho fastest, you know. So it's going to take a lot of teaching, and that's why I always talk about Hitler's willing executioners. We've got way too many of them. So, like I said, Anthony, we haven't spoken in a while. Have you put anything into effect yet?
Yeah, I was going to. I did a there's a lot of, you know, talk about this registered agent stuff, and I was pursuing the name change thing and the correction there really hard. And then I actually applied to change or amend the birth certificate from all caps to proper form in Minnesota here, which is what I was directed to do by this teacher. And long story short, the Attorney General's office stepped in and said that they have a priority interest in maintaining the record in the all capital fashion, which I was going to proper form. And they admitted in that memorandum that they were using foundling statutes, that they communicate with the Social Security Administration, the Department of Health, and all that other business. And they completely destroyed the name change order and everything.
Yeah, and that's perfectly viable, because that's why I say these people out there teaching you to do that stuff haven't done their research. States may be different, and you have to deal with the state and the way they legislate it. It's gonna give you remedy. You just have to understand it.
Yeah, right. And that's what I understood. And, you know, I was pretty hell bent on it. And then I just took a step back. Then I tried to, or I sent a letter to the Secretary of State doing the registered agent thing. And they objected on the grounds that my doing business as the all capital name registration wasn't valid.
Right, and it
And
wasn't because you didn't do it with the right authority.
yeah, which
See that all caps name or you know whatever doesn't it could be upper and lowercase. That estate that they established through the state, that's a tax identifying entity, taxpayer entity, and so you have to take control of it.
right. And that's where I have come to. It's really about surrendering that birth certificate to, from what I've established, a lot of people are just going to the Secretary of Treasury, but God has led me to you, and you're like, well, hey, there's two other places that you need to send it to too, and assign them. So I just see it as, you know, as I'm gonna jump in and go in to the metaphorical pool off the diving board. And then it's like, no, let's go a little higher. Let's go a little higher because you can handle it.
Yep,
Like I
and I'm
wouldn't be
gonna
given a battle that I couldn't handle.
show you the codes that we're talking about. Why I say three birth certificates,
Sure.
and the first one is 49 CFR 24.106, and this is transportation because it's a commercial activity. Commerce means traffic, transportation, and trade. So transportation is your commercial code at the federal level, okay? 49 CFR 24.106, and it says expenses incidental to transfer of title to the agency. The agency is the Health and Human Services. That's where you give them the directive to collect up all the state's minor securities. Once that's done, they have a directive that then says expenses incidental to transfer of title to the United States. And this is Title 42 of the U.S. Code, which is Health and Human Services, Social Welfare. So expenses incidental to transfer of title to the United States. So once they gather them all those minor securities up at the state level, they send them to the United States for settlement and clearing. And then 39, Postal Service, relocation assistance and real property acquisition policies. Expenses incidental to transfer title to the Postal Service. These are the people that are properly supposed to have that title. If that's where equity sits, then you give equity the legal title. And you as equitable title holder have an agreement with the legal title holder as a postal customer.
Guaranteed. And I guarantee if you read the 1611 authorized King James Version, which is what the whole system is based off of, from what I understand, there will be an equivalent in the New Testament to, as it were, transferring that legal title.
Yep, and I don't know how I missed this. It wasn't showing, was it?
That was showing. Yeah, I have all three
okay.
codes and references. Yep. I got 49 CFR 24-106 or 0.106, 42 USC 4653, and 39 CFR 777.33. Yes, sir. I got them all.
Good. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, folks. It's just taking control and transferring that title. And so I'll be back tomorrow night going over some tax forms. Jesse, you were talking about that CAF authorization. That is the centralized authorization file. Centralized authorization file is what CAF stands for. And that's that IRS issue that we're dealing with. Let me pull something else up real quick on Facebook. Show you guys what we're talking about there. Come on. And this goes to the birth record and how it works and the various different authorities that get to control it unless you take control of it. If you don't take control of it, there's all kinds of agencies that have access and control. If I can find it here.
Courts, municipalities, state agencies, sub-agencies. I bet that's all up in there.
Oh yeah, schools, medical
yeah.
clinics, all of them, you know, community centers, libraries.
Unreal. Everywhere you get that name or whatever.
Yep. Now look at this here. This is, look at the top left-hand corner there, folks. That's birth record change right here. Name control hero. And it's got primary name, continuation of primary name. Remember yesterday we talked about primary owner and secondary owner and minor account. The primary owner and a continuation of primary owner. That would be like primary name and continuation. Primary name would be the last name and continuation of that primary name. Kenneth Conrady, continuation of primary name, Keith Conrady. Various things like that. And notice it says foreign street, mail street or foreign city. Mail, city, state, zip, or foreign country. New social security number. New EIN. And they got all these different and this isn't mine or any, this is just one I got offline, and it tells you the kind of information that goes on that record. Filing requirements, a 941, a 940, 3520, a 943, a 945, 1120, 1065. This is for this particular person, whatever kind of entity they are running. And these are all the forms they're filling out.
And those are all IRS forms, I take it.
Correct.
Wow.
Keith, I have a question. Sorry, I didn't
Go ahead.
interrupt there, brother.
No, you're fine.
I had to step away for just a minute, so I kind of missed what you were doing there. What database are you deriving that from?
That's from the IRS. That's a birth record change. That's what happens when we go in and do that CAF thing. Let me show you here. It's the centralized authorization file, CAF authorization rules from the IRS. That's what we're going to be going over next. That's that form you were talking about, the 2848.
Yep. Yeah, I have my CAF number for first,
8821.
First, middle, initial, last, and first and last.
Yep.
So get the CAF numbers first and then fill out the 2848 because it asks you to put it on there.
Right. You get the CAF number. Well, you get the CAF.
My bad. What I was going to say is usually people have been doing it the other way around. They fill out the 2848 and the 8821 and send it in and try to get the CAF number that way. But I found it's easier if you just go to irs.gov.pro.alt and you can apply for the CAF number right there. It takes 10 minutes. Yeah,
so get the CAF number first, and then there are other documentations. And we'll be going over those tonight, like the 2848, the 8821, the 706, 4506T. What else do I have? A 1040X. Publication 4019 as to that third-party authorization. And that's all we're doing is we're providing for a third-party authorization because, like I said, all those different agencies under that state's vital statistics jurisdiction are given automatic authorization to access. Those are first and second party authorizations. We as a third party, as a beneficiary, have to take the authorization to control it and take that control away from them and settle the estate. They're not supposed to be touching it. You're not working for the state. It's a private matter not a public matter. Everything's been commingled, and we have a right to fix that, and that's all we're doing. So
I got 2 questions if you've got time, Keith.
sure.
All right. So I'm in Minnesota again, and the estate recovery deal under the Department of Human Services is a medical assistance procedure. Does that sound right, or is that perhaps
Who's telling you that?
deal?
Yeah, who's
This
telling
is
you
the
that?
this is the Department of Human Services website, and it's medical
Oh, so
assistance
it's just
estate recovery manual.
yeah, the Health and Human Services is responsible for estate recovery. So, what is estate recovery? Well, they're going to say that, well, that's so that we can go ahead and access the estate after you pass away and recoup what you owe us for our assistance.
Mm,
That's not what they're doing, though, is it?
no.
See, that's payable on death. Why are you taking it out of me while I'm living? See, I have to have this as a necessity of life. You're doing it for pecuniary purposes as if though you're due and owing. Payable on death. I have no way to pay. Better learn to read HCR 192.
Okay.
I don't have any way to pay except to give you a promise. And that promise is in the form of a certificate that I get from the state. And I'm going to surrender it you. And I'm going to promise with a value of $2.5 million or whatever I deem necessary. And you can collect from that estate after I pass away.
Okay. Perfect. Now, leads into my second question, because I detest any of that fucking money going to an abortion clinic, going to a bomb manufacturing facility. Can you put conditions on that money?
I don't see how it would go to anything like that. If it's yours and you lost the other device, Jesse?
I was trying to log on my phone. I got you.
Okay. Okay, so why would they give any of your money to any organizations like that?
Well, because the state of Minnesota directly funds abortion clinics and the sort of those sorts of facilities, as far as I'm aware.
Right.
And my concern is if that money, which I don't mind paying bills and I don't mind putting food in people's mouths and educating public servants' children, it's my duty as one of the people to make sure that they're taken care of too, as far as I'm concerned. But it ain't murdering, children or anything to that effect. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering if you do a conditional release, perhaps, of funds.
No, just set them aside for a specific purpose. That way they can't.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you just name a specific purpose, and then it goes for that specific purpose. This is the Anthony Fillion Jr. Trust Fund, and it can't go for any other purpose.
Yeah, and then you enumerate the scope of the trust
Right.
functions. Yep.
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right. And I want to thank everybody for joining us again today. Appreciate everybody's love and kindness. We're going to head out. And what do you guys got? Oop, we lost Jesse again. So, anything on the way out, Anthony?
God bless you, Brother Keith. And God
All
bless
glory goes
everybody
to him.
listening.
You bet. All glory goes to him. And you guys know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. That's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you and have a good night. We'll see everybody again tomorrow where we'll continue on with those IRS forms. See you then. Bye now.